How do airplanes actually fly? In 1917, the man who had just rewritten our whole picture of space and time set it all aside for a much smaller problem. Albert Einstein wanted to design an airplane wing. What he came up with was odd, a humped shape with a big bulge running along its back, like a cat arching in the afternoon sun. That's actually what engineers ended up calling it, the cat's back. Einstein was sure the thing would lift like a dream. It didn't. When a test pilot finally muscled the machine into the air, he said, flying it felt like riding a pregnant duck as it lurched around the sky. The greatest mind of the century had read a wing wrong. And here's the part that stings the explanation most of us picked up in school. The tidy one that's been repeated in classrooms for generations gets it wrong in almost exactly the same way. So how does a wing actually keep a 50-ton machine hanging in the air? Before any of that makes sense, you have to quit thinking of air as nothing. We push through it all day and never feel it, but air is a fluid thinner than water, sure, yet made of the same jittery crowd of molecules, and it shoves back against anything that shoves it aside. That one idea was slow to catch on. One of the first people to treat flight like an engineering problem you could actually solve instead of a bird's trick we were doomed to envy was an English gentleman scientist tinkering away in the early 1800s. He figured out that any flying machine is really juggling four forces at once: weight, dragging it down; lift, holding it up; thrust, pulling it forward; drag, hauling it back, and that the smart move was to let a fixed wing make the lift and let something else handle the push. Up to then, most dreamers were still lashing feathers to their arms and flapping. He sketched out the blueprint everyone else would build on. But knowing a wing makes lift and knowing why it makes lift are two very different things. And this is right where the whole story veers off in the wrong direction for a solid 100 years. Decades before that, Englishman, a Swiss mathematician, had spotted something curious about moving fluids. Speed one up and its pressure drops. Real effect. Genuinely part of the answer. Somewhere along the line though, it got flattened into a neat little myth. It goes like this: a wing's curved on top and flatter underneath. Air splitting at the leading edge has a longer road to travel over the hump, so it's got to rush to catch back up with its partner at the trailing edge. Faster air up top, lower pressure, and the wing gets sucked skyward. It sounds clean. It draws beautifully on a chalkboard. Teachers ate it up. Just one snag: those air molecules that split at the nose feel no obligation whatsoever to reunite at the tail. They never do. Run the real experiment and the air racing over the top gets to the back edge way ahead of the air crawling underneath, which knocks the whole matched journey story flat. The wing still flies. The explanation was a ghost the entire time. The early pioneers couldn't afford to wait for the theory to be right. They needed wings that flew, and they got there the hard way: trial, crash, and pure stubbornness. A German engineer built these fragile glider wings and threw himself off hillsides over and over through the 1890s, collecting hard numbers on curved surfaces, right up until a fall killed him. A pair of bicycle makers in Ohio didn't trust the published figures, so they built their own little wind tunnel and ran dozens of tiny wing shapes through it, letting the moving air tell them straight what curve, what angle, what thickness truly lifted. Out of all that fiddling came the shape we call an airfoil rounded up front, tapering to a knife edge at the back, not because anyone had cracked the physics, but because that outline kept whipping every other one they threw at it. Now here's what's really going on across that shape, and it's weirder and a whole lot more physical than anything you'd chalk on a board. As the wing drives forward, the thinnest possible skin of air grabs onto its surface and tugs the surrounding air along with it. The flow splits and traces the wing's shape over the top and under the bottom. Up top, as that air rounds the nose and clings to the curve, it gets whipped through a hard turn, the same sideways pull you feel pressing you into the door when a car takes a corner too fast. That turn forces the air to pick up speed and its pressure to drop. Down below, the air barely bends at all, so its pressure stays higher. Now you've got higher pressure pushing up from underneath and lower pressure tugging up from above, and add all that squeeze together across the whole wing, and you get lift. There's a second way to look at the very same thing, and it's the one that could have spared Einstein the embarrassment. A wing doesn't just knife cleanly through the air, it seizes a huge slab of it and flings it downward, off the back edge, straight toward the ground, and whatever you throw down has to shove back up on you just as hard. The plane surfs that shove, see it that way, and the wing stops being some clever vacuum trick and turns into something plainer and more honest a machine for hurling air at the planet. Which is exactly why a wing doesn't even need a curve. Take a flat board, tip its nose up into the wind, and it'll fly, as long as the air wraps around it and gets thrown down behind. Tilt is the whole game, that angle between the wing and the oncoming air. Nudge it up a bit and lift climbs right along with it. But tilt it too far, or carve the curve too steep, and the air can't hold onto the surface anymore. It rips away, boils into churning turbulence, and the lift vanishes in a heartbeat. That collapse has a name, a stall, and it's almost certainly what killed Einstein's overbuilt hump. He'd bet that more curve meant more lift. What he got was a wing so extreme the air flat out refused to follow it. Every last detail of a modern wing is a bargain struck with those limits. The gentle camber, the measured thickness, the sharp back edge, that slight nose-up angle as the plane climbs, all of it is there to keep the air stuck to the surface across a huge spread of speeds. Those upturned tips on airliner wings, they're there to calm the little tornadoes that spin off the ends, where high-pressure air from below sneaks around to the low-pressure zone up top and swirls off into the distance, quietly robbing the wing of lift and burning extra fuel. Even the way a fast jet's wings sweep back is a truce with the physics of air bunching up as the plane crowds in on the speed of sound. And after all of that, here's a quiet little admission from the people who build these things. Get a room full of aerodynamicists and ask them why. Deep down, the pressure really drops over a wing and you won't get one answer. Some will lead with the air speeding around the curve, others with the mass of air being flung downward. Same wing, same flight. Both right. The one thing none of them will fight about is the math. There's a set of equations, hammered out back in the 1800s, that maps the swirl and press of moving fluids so precisely that engineers can tell you exactly how much a wing will lift before anyone's ever cut the metal. We can pin flight down to the decimal point. We just can't quite settle on the story we tell about it. And that's the quiet joke tucked inside Einstein's failure. It wasn't bad math that beat him, or clumsy hands. It was a good story, that gut feeling that a bigger, bolder hump would claw more sky out of the air. The wing that actually works is humbler than that. It doesn't cheat gravity, doesn't fool the air. It just reaches out, grabs a chunk of the atmosphere and throws it down hard enough that the whole aircraft gets shoved up in return. A plane doesn't rise because the air is holding it up. It rises because every single second it's pushing the sky underneath it out of the way.